Members, I rise in opposition to this budget. There are so many reasons why I'm voting no, but I'm not going to talk about each and every single one of them. I want to highlight some of the sticking points for me, starting with the Affordable Housing Sadowski Trust Fund. Yesterday, we heard in questions that we are once again sweeping the Affordable Housing Trust Fund by $182 million. We are in an affordable housing crisis. We all know that. We know it because we live in the state of Florida. We've seen our constituents have been suffering from it and suffering under it. And we saw what happened after this devastating hurricane. The crisis has been exacerbated by evacuees from Puerto Rico, from the Virgin Islands, who, as of right now, might not have anywhere to go next week, because next week the TSA program expires, a FEMA program that lets them use vouchers to stay in temporary hotels. Where are they going to go if that's not extended next week? They don't have anywhere to go. Now, I will acknowledge that money is not the only issue when it comes to affordable housing programs, but it's a huge part of it. I also understand that if $10 billion fell out of the sky today for affordable housing, that we won't be able to necessarily get those folks into permanent, stable housing overnight. It's going to take years. Why is it going to take years? It's going to take years because year after year after year, we do the same thing here in the legislature. We sweep the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We put ourselves deeper and deeper into this hole. And so what is the solution this year? After all of this has come to its worst fruition imaginable, with Puerto Ricans sleeping in cars in Orlando because they have nowhere else to go, we're raiding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund again. At least the Senate is of good mind and conscience that they have decided this year that they're going to do the responsible thing, and they are not going to sweep the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. They should be applauded. And they're called trust funds for a reason, because the public trusts that we are going to spend those appropriations the way they were originally intended. Why have we swept $397 million total in trust funds to plug budget holes that shouldn't exist and to cut taxes that we can't afford to cut? How do I know we can't afford? Well, because we are robbing the trust fund to pay for it. That in and of itself is proof that we can't afford it. And $8 million right now we have in the budget for the Florida Forever program, which was totally zeroed out last year. That is a paltry appropriation compared to what we actually need. And we are constitutionally obligated to fund Amendment 1, members. We have to remember that. And to echo what was just mentioned by my colleague, Representative Peters, mental health. This year, we are 50th in the nation in funding for mental health care services, our state. And you know what? The experts say if Puerto Rico were a state, we would be 51st behind them. That is the sad state of affairs that we are in right now. This budget does nothing to move us away from dead last in spending for mental health care. Pam Bondi was right. $50 million is a drop in the bucket when it comes to spending to address the opioid crisis. Yesterday it was suggested that, well, we have $632 million and we're going to be able to address opioids because we're spending that money on mental health and substance abuse. We're not spending all of that on the opioid epidemic. That's not happening. If we were spending it on the opioid epidemic, then central receiving centers across the state wouldn't have had to cut beds last year, as they undoubtedly will again this year after this budget. And what we have to remember is, while it might save us money in the short term, in the long term, cutting funding to central receiving centers is not going to help us financially. Why? Because I actually learned from my colleague, Representative Peters, last year that for every single detox bed that is cut as a result of this budget that we're going to pass, that there are 4 or 5 pregnant women who will give birth to babies who are addicted to opiates. And you know what that costs the state? About $280,000 per baby that is born addicted to opiates. Short-term saving, long-term, major cost to the state. We are paying for these costs in the long run. And don't even get me started on PICO. I guess you don't have to because I'm going to get started anyway. 2,790 traditional public schools getting $50 million. 654 charter schools getting $120 million. I heard what Chair Baleka said, and I agree with some of what he said. There are charter schools who need these PICO dollars. They are hungry for more resources. Yes, they are. But you know what? Our traditional public schools are starving for more resources. They're starving. Why? Because they have broken air conditioners across the state where our kids are trying to learn. They have dilapidated school buildings that need repair. In Orange County alone, Orange County Public Schools, last year, $67 million in deferred maintenance and unmet urgent capital needs. That's evidence of, this budget is evidence of legislative bias towards charters. It's evidence of a movement to slowly privatize public education in this state. One statute at a time, one budget line item at a time, one voucher scheme at a time. Not to mention the $300 million in cuts to higher education. Last year, I objected to the higher education overhaul, not because we didn't have improvements to Bright Futures, for example. We did for academic scholars, but because I believed we didn't go far enough to help those medallion scholars under Bright Futures. Medallion scholars who, by the way, under a policy bill we passed, are supposed to now finally get 75% of their tuition reimbursed. But don't be fooled, because while we're ready to pass that policy measure in the House, the budget says that they get 0. They're not getting extra funding compared to last year, medallion scholars. The budget does not give them 75%. And why is that so important to me? It's important to me because I was a medallion scholar. And I understand that those medallion scholars need this extra tuition reimbursement because compared to academic scholars, medallion scholars are disproportionately more likely to be low income. They're disproportionately more likely to be minority students. And they need the help. And it's not there right now in the budget. I also have a complaint with my no vote on this bill on the process. And it's a serious one, but I'm not sure what to do with this complaint. I had legitimate policy-based questions yesterday around the Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust Fund, around the Best and Brightest Scholarship Program, but I was told I couldn't ask those policy-based questions on the budget. But members, where am I supposed to go with my questions? I'm not on the Education Committee. I'm not on the K-12 Policy Committee. I have major questions and concerns around the Best and Brightest Scholarship Program. And this is my only opportunity to raise those questions. We're appropriating $254 million towards a program that I have some major objections to. But I can't ask questions. Why? Questions on the budget. But why can't I really ask my questions? Because for some reason, we are rolling all of these policy bills into the budget. We're not supposed to be doing that. We weren't supposed to do it last year. We're not supposed to do it this year. And we're not supposed to do it next year for any number of reasons, for constitutional reasons, for legal reasons. But also because as a member, I want to have my questions answered. But I can't. I have to ask specifically about the budget, not about policy. So if we're going to remedy this, members, I'll stop asking policy questions on the budget when you stop wrapping policy into the budget. A vote for this budget is a vote for House Bill 7055, which we already know is a voucher scheme. And of course there's good in this budget. There's extra FEFP funding. We're moving in the right direction for Bright Futures, even though I think that there's some core components missing. But for some of the members in the back row, don't feel like you must vote yes on this budget, because if you don't, you're going to get attacked for voting against all the good things that we see here. Reality check. If you vote yes or no, you're going to get attacked anyway. So vote your conscience, if you still have one, and vote no on this bill. Thank you.